Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the BTNSU Indiana Basketball Show. I'm Brandon Schaff alongside Ari Bruckman, who's filling in for Connor Hines on this week's edition of the show. Ari's been working with us all season long on the Friday edition of the show, so without further ado, why don't you let everyone know what's coming up?
Thanks, Brandon. A lot to get to on the show today, both men's and women's hoops in action this past week as the men look to continue their winning ways in Ann Arbor as they took on the Michigan Wolverines. The women were looking to extend their win streak to 3 as they welcomed the Ohio State Buckeyes to Assembly Hall, a game Terry Morin would like to have back.
Well, we certainly got a lot to discuss about the state of both programs, Ari, but let's get started with the men. Following a much-needed home win over the number 120 ranked Iowa Hawkeyes, the Hoosiers traveled to Ann Arbor for the first of 2 conference matchups on the road. Senior big man Deron Davis certainly had himself a day, scoring a career-best 18 points on a perfect 9-for-9 shooting that came almost exclusively from the paint. Davis's performance was matched only by junior guard Al Durham as the only hope for the Hoosiers as the Wolverines gradually pulled away, putting the game well out of reach by the final buzzer. Durham shot 60% from the floor and scored 17 points, but Indiana ultimately fell to Michigan at the Chrysler Center 89-65. The loss drops the Hoosiers' road record to 1-7 this season, with the last 3 losses coming by double digits. Next up, they'll remain up north for a showdown with the Minnesota Gophers Wednesday.
That's right, Brandon. They'll look to use that Minnesota matchup to get back on track this Wednesday night. But Brandon, I want to stay with the Michigan game here for a second. There are 2 stats in this game for IU that really tell the whole story of how this one went down. Now, you mentioned Deron Davis having a great performance off the bench, and while that's very much true, the rest of the Hoosiers bench shot just 2 for 16. So not only did their bench players not produce, aside from Deron Davis, but as a team, the Hoosiers shot 3 for 12, just 25% from 3. This is a team that is already shooting the 3 ball at an abysmal 31% from 3 from the year. In order for the men to bounce back against a team like Minnesota, it's going to take a better shooting performance from beyond the arc and more production off the bench from guys like Devontae Green, who's averaging 11 points per game this season.
Yeah, that's exactly what you're talking about, and Devontae Green is pretty much the key point here. Just 1 game after he scores 27 against Iowa on a fantastic shooting night with more threes than you could possibly ask for. He comes into this one, he goes 1 for 7 from beyond the arc. And then you talk about this team really not doing anything coming off the bench. Even your starters, your main producers like Trish Jackson Davis, really not getting that much done inside the paint against a team that you really felt like they had the opportunity to do something special here, continue the momentum after Iowa. And it seems like after all of these ranked opponents that they've been able to beat, the first one that comes to mind is Michigan State when they were able to beat Michigan State at home. The next game, even though it was at home against Maryland, they just did not look the same. They gave up way too many threes. And now here we are once again with a get-back game opportunity here against Minnesota. And we'll see if that's going to be enough.
Backward, Berger, wide open, lays it in. Stability out of Oklahoma State. Penn, catch and shoot. Splash.
And she does a great job right there again, finishing.
I mentioned before, Brandon, how Terry Morin wanted this one back. Here's why. The IU women's basketball team welcomed the Ohio State Buckeyes to Assembly Hall in hopes of beating the Buckeyes for the first time since head coach Kevin McGuff took over. He holds a 13-0 record against IU. The story in this one seemed to be the Hoosiers never quite pulling away. The Hoosiers led this one up until the 3-minute mark of the 4th quarter, shooting an impressive 38% from 3 in the first half and even had the lead as large as 10. IU was led by redshirt junior guard Ali Papperg, who finished this one with 22 points, shooting 8 of 12 from the field. This 10-point lead would not last long, though. The Hoosiers cooled off from beyond the arc fairly quickly, shooting a disappointing 1 for 7 in the second half. That 10-point lead lasted just 2 minutes before Ohio State guard Madison Green made it a 2-possession game in the 4th quarter. Green had 16 of her 22 points come in the 4th quarter to propel the Buckeyes to 16-9 overall with an 80-76 victory in Bloomington.
Yeah, it was interesting to see what happened with this one because we were talking about how Indiana really was riding the ship, getting on a good groove here, and then they go against Ohio State, even at home here, and just an abysmal 4th quarter effort. They gave up 31 points in the fourth quarter alone. Let the Buckeyes shoot 78.6% from the floor, which is just not going to get the job done, despite the fact that Ali Patberg, who's been leading the way pretty much the entire season, had 22.6 assists, 3 rebounds, just filling up that stat line. They out-rebounded yet another opponent, but unfortunately, it was just not enough, as even with 4 Hoosiers in double figures like Alexei Golbey was able to get up there and get some major rebounds once again, and Jalen Penn, who's just been nonstop on fire this season. It just wasn't enough, and now they're going to have to go face Minnesota on the road, which should be a little bit more of a break for them, considering the fact that Minnesota is 5-9 in the conference.
Even with the women losing, still good news to take home, though, for Terry Morin's crew. Starting guard Ali Patberg, another impressive performance, and named one of 10 finalists for the Nancy Lieberman Award, announced by the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame. She is the first finalist for the award in IU women's basketball history.
Well, that wraps up this edition of the BTNSU Indiana Basketball Show. We'll be right back on Friday in the Franklin Hall lobby with more coverage of upcoming games this week. For Ari Bruckman, I'm Brandon Schaff, and for more Indiana Hoosiers coverage, be sure to follow us all season long on the IU Sports Media Instagram and YouTube pages. We'll see you at the next one.